way that no one else can ever see. Designing for change of ownership is a really interesting problem. So what happens if you move out and someone wants to take over your smart thermostat? How do they prevent you from controlling the heating when they've moved in? And I'd really urge thinking about the difficult edge cases here. So very recently, a women's support group has reported that domestic abuse victims are finding that people are taking over and using smart devices against them, having left the home. So you have to design features like a very obvious physical reset button. That sounds really obvious, but it's actually quite hard to work out how to take back control of a lot of smart devices. So a button with a little label on it is a great move, not just hiding that in an instruction manual. And if you're doing end-to-end encryption, because like in the first suggestion, this is an opportunity to make new keys. And by making new keys, you immediately throw away access to the old owner. And the final thing is to design to protect metadata. So what that means is not the data itself, like the smart thermostat temperature reading, but the time and the amount of data that's sent across the network. So I'm going to show you, and this is a graph of my last week of internet traffic. In the top one, you can see it's Monday, I was in, it's very obvious that I was in, and then you can see that I've been away for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. You don't know what the traffic was, but just the metadata about how much shows you a lot about my activity. And thanks to Adrian for this one. Sending decoy data is something you can do to mitigate metadata attack, where you send a junk piece of information at some regular random interval, and the other end just knows that it's junk and drops it. So very briefly, thank you makers for making great things, and please join me in making things safe as well as making them cool. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul. You are all at Ignite Liverpool at Makefest, and we were on a session about space. That was about the inner space of the mind in your own privacy in your home. And we're going to now zoom all the way out to the other end to astronomy for Phil, who's a Liverpool astronomer, who's going to talk about outer space. And he's got 5 minutes, and all his slides will automatically advance every 15 seconds. So, yeah, are you ready? I'm going to give you the microphone.
Well, hello, my name's Phil Williams from Liverpool Astronomical Society. I'm going to talk very quickly and briefly about our place in the universe. Our society is engaged in making community. We are a registered charity and are there to really explain to the people of Liverpool and the surrounding area the interest of space. Starting off then with our local community, this is our solar system, and this is to scale. And if you can see, which you probably can't from the end of the society, from the room there, the third little rock along at the bottom there was Earth. This is the same slide in terms of the size of the planets: Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, in order from the Sun. And in addition, we have a number of dwarf planets. In addition to the planets of the solar system, we have lots and lots of interesting moons, particularly around Saturn and Jupiter. Of course, we have only one single moon of our own. As well as the moons of the major planets, there are also two distinct belts within our solar system. The asteroid inner belt between Mars and Jupiter, and the outer Kuiper belt, another belt of rocks and rocky ice within the system. And these are examples of the four biggest asteroids in our solar system, putting them to size against the background of the United States there. Again, going back to the belt system, we were looking at the inner belt just then in terms of the asteroids. We quickly look at the outer belt, which is called the Kuiper belt, and is probably a little less known. Again, we have a variety of different objects there, including what was a planet, Pluto, but was downgraded when it was realised that there are a large number of similar bodies in that position within our solar system. In addition to all the things I've mentioned so far, again, you'll be familiar with comets that occasionally enter the system and can be seen in the night sky. Obviously things like Halley's Comet, and there are a number of other comets that you may be familiar with. This would be a video presentation of the entire solar system, but we're short on time, so I can't show that to you at the moment. So when this one turns over, we'll have a look at a few more shots. And this is the sorts of talk that we would give to the general community purely by volunteers who give up their time to engage the community in general with the interest and the hobby of space and astronomy. This was a picture taken by a distant probe of the Earth from many millions of miles from Earth itself as a white dot. And you may have heard of this term as the pale blue dot, rather, that constitutes the Earth. And this is a shot of Earth taken by the Cassini spacecraft nestling within the rings of Saturn. And it shows you how tiny and insignificant we are within the universe. I've got a few short shots now of different planets. You'll recognise that one as Mars. And again, this is the sort of thing we would deliver to people at various outreach events throughout the Merseyside area. We have an observatory just outside Liverpool at Bexhill, where we have regular weekly meetings where we study the night sky and we look at particularly the visible planets that can be seen throughout the year from there. I've just got a selection of different styles, different photographs, astronomical photographs now. And of course, this is a beautiful picture of our own star, the Sun, as it rises above the Liverpool skyline. A couple of weeks ago, I was up here on the top of the cathedral tower, and if you ever get the chance to get up there, Thursday nights they do an evening where you can get to the top and watch the sunrise. This is our solar system, Milky Way. Earth is one of billions of stars within the system, many billions of stars. And Milky Way is only one of a number of many millions of galaxies. And this is a local group of galaxies that relate to ourselves. And this is quite a famous photograph. This is a photograph of about the size of a sixpence taken by the Hubble Space Telescope in space. We see nothing from Earth when we look there. But when you use Hubble, you get an entire view of the millions of galaxies that we have. So that's an example of the type of presentation that we do, normally over half an hour, to visitors and members of the society. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Phil, for compressing your half-hour talk into 5 beautiful minutes. You are all at Ignite Liverpool, at Liverpool Makefest, where we're at a session about space, inner space and outer space. So now we've just seen what our place in the universe is. Our next talk is from Joe, who actually knows Concrete Dog, who's going to tell us how to get there as makers. No pressure. Yeah. So rockets and making. Yeah, are you ready?
I think so.
Ready?
Oh, that's not the first slide, sorry. That's slide 5. It's because we tried it before, isn't it?
Just a quick reminder, think of questions to ask, because we have a panel afterwards where we'll be asking questions.
Yeah?
Hello, my name's Joe. Yes, I'm also known as Concrete Dog. That's my kind of maker and my artist name. And I am here to make a plea for people to democratise space by making more open source rockets. But I'm actually going to tell you about loads of things that I'm involved in. So the first thing about rockets, they make you look fine. Or maybe not. So yeah, this is a high power rocket that I scratch built, I designed it and I launched it to get my high power rocketry certification. Because with big rockets, you're not just allowed to let them off in the park, you have to go to a launch event. The launch events are run by the UK Rocketry Association, of which I'm on the council. It's just like the Jedi High Council, but maybe not quite as exciting because we deal with insurance and safety and technical committees and there's definitely less lightsabers. So I like to design my rockets and I love to use open source software. So I use this bit of software called Open Rocket, and it allows people to design and simulate rockets that they can then go away and build. So that's a tremendously powerful thing. But apart from just designing and building rockets, I like to go around and waffle on and talk and show rockets and get rockets into people's hands. So this is last year here. So quite often I go off and I talk about rockets and I display them and I do a bit of that. But I also do silly things with my arms. No, I also run rocketry workshops where I go, and this is like just for passion. This isn't my job. I just love it. I go to like maker spaces or hack spaces and run free events where we look at, the design sort of software, and we talk about how we could use makerspace or Fab Lab tools to make rockets. So yeah, I've done some in North Wales. This one was at Mad Lab in Manchester, which was, they have a thing called the Manchester Space Programme. On another tack, another thing I've got involved in is, in North Wales, we haven't got many space tech startups. So I've started running events in North Wales, again, just for passion, because it's cool to get excited about stuff. So this was an event where I got lots of people together, and we worked on projects for the European Space Agency's Space Exploration Masters competition. And then I tried to convince them all to submit their ideas and win loads of money and set up businesses. But they didn't, because they didn't quite believe that we can do space in North Wales. But we can, because look at me, I'm an idiot. I built hobby rockets, but last year I ended up getting invited, because of all the outreach work I do, to the European Space Agency. That's just ridiculous. But I went there, talked to 200 academics at the open source CubeSat workshop, which are a type of satellite which people can build. And then they've got a mini brother, which is called the Pocket Cube satellite, which is a 50mm cube form factor of satellite, and loads of amateurs building it around the world. And I sort of started a kind of community around those. But when I was at that conference, I met these guys, the Libre Space Foundation. They're wicked. They've got a global project called SatNox. This is the one in my garden. It's you can download this. It's open source, and look at it. It's all over the world. And what it does is you can whip your phone out and you can schedule your ground station to listen to stuff as it goes over your house in space. And that might be a conversation from the International Space Station, for example, like this. So this is a man called Freddie who lives in Athens, who dialed in like the 1980s, on the web. It's a my ground station in North Wales, and recorded this, which was an astronaut talking to a group from the International Space Station. This is a picture I took of from an NOAA-16 satellite as it went over my house at dawn, and they're really rare because you get these observations where a satellite's going over just as the sun rises, and I thought, it's going to be beautiful, man. I could see the mountains, but it was cloudy. Yeah, this is Copenhagen suborbitals. So back to rockets. They're a brilliant group. They're an amateur group trying to do a manned space launch. But you know what? They're not open source. Oh, I want them to be open source. So what I've done, I've started building rockets, and instead of just going off and launching them and like paying money to launch my own rockets, I'm putting the design files for my rockets online. So if you want to find out about rocketry, do please get in touch. But you can download all this stuff on my Git, and like you can make this, and you can go and launch it, and you can do it, and it's ace. And then maybe, just maybe, we'll end up with a global movement. Because instead of just being me, like a bit of a kind of lonely weirdo in a field dancing on my own, you could all be with me. And we could have global coverage, and we could start building bigger rockets. And we could really, really, really democratise space. That'd be alright, wouldn't it? So, thanks for having me. Get in touch, find me. Concrete Dog, that's my email. And check out the Rocketry Society as well, because it is just like joining the Jedis. Cheers, thank you very much.
Wow. Yeah, Phil, you come forward too. We're going to have a panel of questions. Thank you for all three talks on the inner space of smart home privacy, to astronomy and what there is in space, to how we can get there using open source apparently as well soon. Really exciting. Right, what questions have we got? Who's got a question? If you could say who you are as well.
Hi, I'm Carol. I'm from Math Science. How can I stop Google and Google Play taking over my Samsung phone?
I actually think the honest answer to that is probably through regulation. There's actually there's a GDPR complaint in Austria at the moment against Google for this very thing, which is how hard it is to extract Google from an Android phone. So they've monopolised the operating system in a way that it's very difficult to not kind of commit to using Google just from using Android. And technically, I'm not that hopeful. Actually, I've tried, but I don't have confidence I've succeeded. So probably the way forward on that one is going to be either a fork of Android that removes Google again, or through regulation. I'm actually really hopeful about GDPR, so perhaps solving this problem. But that doesn't make me miss the GDPR.
Do you have a space angle on that?
Send your phone away in a rocket.
And Maureen, what's the fuel you use for your rockets?
Sorry, what was it?
What fuel do you use for your rockets?
Most of the rockets that are built and launched by amateurs in the UK use a solid rocket propeller, which is not massively dissimilar to the stuff that's in fireworks, but it's a different type that you buy as rocket motors for rocketry. And then there's also a group of kind of, it's not legal to make your own solid rocket chemical motors in the UK, but what is legal is a thing called hybrid rocketry, where people use a gas tank with some nitrous oxide, a solid fuel grade, so that's a bit more lenient, and people are doing kind of experimental and more research work with that. So yeah.
So it's not Mentos and lemonade then?
It's not, no. Although it's quite good fun.
Hello, it's Tanya. I've got another question for Joe. Leads on nicely from the last one. If we've already done bottle rockets, what's the next step without getting into legal trouble?
That's a great question, and I think the next step, and I'm not on commission, even though I probably should be, is if you Google for Estes rockets, ESTES, they for about 30 quid you can get some of the small stuff that I've got on display sent to your house. And if you've got a football field sized place or a big park, or if you live in the country, if you've got like a farmer's field, they'll let you use it. You need there's no, obviously read the instructions and follow the rules, but there's no kind of, there's no legal requirement for you to register or to be insured or anything. And then when you've got the bug and you want to build something really big, come and see me and we'll get you hooked up with insurance and go into launch events.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I feel like I've just cost you about over the next few months.
Hi, my name's Eric. Two questions. One for Paul. Are we going to see, on MX records, are we going to see encryption on those? Because what we have is a problem. People can always see who you're sending email to. Do you know of any initiatives to encrypt everything at that level so that even where you're sending your email to is hidden?
Are you talking about metadata? That's the second question.
And the second question is, if I was building something as big as a Tochka rocket, am I going to get into trouble? Because there must be limitations on the range, surely.
Good question.
Okay. Paul?
So I think what you're asking about is the famous metadata problem of email, where even if you figure out how to encrypt email to other email recipients, which is actually quite hard, the who you're sending it to, when all the recipients and the subject tend to be, the metadata are unencrypted and visible. So some of the promising things in this area that actually, like Google is a funny example, because in one way they are huge violators of privacy, and in another way they have really pushed forward standards on inter-email provider protection. So any email sent within Google is only probably seen by Google, no one else. Any email between Google and one of the other big providers, almost certainly encrypted in a strong way between those two providers. That doesn't stop the providers looking, but the metadata problem, if I know what you're talking about, is being solved in that way. But we are way off protecting the actual content of emails from Google, anyone else.
Oscar rockets?
On Tosca rockets or large rocket projects. So the UK, we have this governing body, the UK Rocketry Association, and basically there actually aren't any limits,
but what there are is you will have to go through increased scrutiny, and you would have to get more and more you'd have to do more and more work to convince our safety and technical committee to kind of allow you to kind of launch in the UK. But theoretically, there is kind of no limit to what people can do if it's kind of not aiming to harm anybody, and if you can prove to a safety and technical committee that it's kind of safe, we will try and find a place for you to launch it. There have been things where people have built massively huge airframes that are massively powerful that we've had to launch off Scotland to be recovered out at sea, and so there is genuinely kind of no real limit. But obviously, if you just go up and do it, you're going to get in trouble. But if you're communicating with the right authorities, that this is all there for the taking.
Can I ask you a question? How does the Rocketry Association, or if indeed it does, link to the UK Space Agency?
That's a very timely question, and there are aspects of that question that I can't answer. But what I will say in a roundabout way is there are currently lots of changes going on in terms of regulation of both vertical launches, so things that go straight up like rockets, and horizontal space launches, so things that go out horizontally on a plane and then launch a rocket off it. Because of the push for UK Space Force, there's currently a lot of changes in regulation, and there's a whole heap of sort of stuff that needs to be written for that to happen. And both the UK Space Agency and the UK Rocketry Association are involved in that. And beyond that, I can't sort of say much more.
They're two distinct organisations.
Yeah. So, but it's, without being mean, because it's not intended, it's interesting that on a practical level, the UK Rocketry Association launches hundreds and hundreds of rockets, from tiny things to great big things each year. But UK Space Agency is sort of having to recruit people to try and get that expertise, because we haven't actually launched that much stuff. We haven't launched anything commercially rocket-wise since a long time ago. Yeah. Good question.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Hi, I watched all the Apollo space missions to the moon. It's now over 40 years since we've been to the moon. Do you think we're going to get back there? And do you think it's safe in America's hands?
I think we certainly will eventually get back there. The answer to your second question, maybe not just at the moment.
Sorry, I presume
It's a great question. I think we will get back there. I actually think currently there is some impetus to get back there. I think with NASA's Deep Space Gateway, which is a big complex program that I won't explain, but there's some reasons why I think commercially some of the big prime movers in space will want to get back there. I also think, but we do live in quite bonkers times, he said as an understatement. And I think that there's these mentions of things like Space Force and stuff like that. They're very contentious, and they're things that kind of And I'm not trying to support anybody politically, particularly not Trump. I will say it. But I think there are opportunities while the madman is in charge. There are opportunities for companies to kind of push the envelope, because it. Well, are we still recording? Because he's a freaking cowboy. He's an absolute raging madman. So it's easy to say to a raging madman, "Hey, let's move this policy around so that we can do a Mars launch together." Because he'll do that. But equally, he'll also move policy around to keep children locked in cages. So rough with the smooth, eh?
Thank you.
Sorry, I know that's going to
the question over here. It was still being recorded, but you can persuade Neil to edit it.
Joe, I suppose I have to say it. Elon Musk, what's your take on it? Is it a good thing, just like publicity hype, or is he going somewhere with this? Or should he be going somewhere with this?
Yeah.
Actually, I'm going to add to that to ask Paul about Elon Musk and Tesla and privacy.
Okay. Do you know what? I mean, there's loads and loads. I come across loads and loads of Elon Musk fanboys talking about this stuff. People who revere him as a god, and I'm certainly not one of those. I certainly see problems with Tesla. I certainly see problems with all his businesses because they're very complex things that he's trying to achieve. But that said, blimey, the lad's done some amazing stuff with space. You know, he's had a lot of help. I mean, if there wasn't a NASA, there wouldn't be an Elon Musk. He's taken a lot of government funding and subsidies to do what he's done. But he's done it, and he's radically changed the market. And he's made a market for other people, like New Zealand's Rocket Lab, who are sort of the second or third crazy dancers in that high-end field, who will, you know, build a big industry. And that does start to democratise space for everyone. So I don't worship him as some people do, but I think he is breaking down some massive walls that have stood for a long time and pushing development like nobody else at the moment.
And can internet-connected cars ever be private?
So Tesla took a fascinating approach to how they developed their autonomous driving capability, which is obviously still being developed, but the way they did this was to orchestrate the cars with an enormous amount of sensors, way more than they really knew what to do with at the time, and internet connected them so that all the data came back to Tesla. And this was really smart because it gave them millions of miles of training data about real driving, real scenarios. They took this to such an extreme that they even run simulations on real driving Teslas without telling the driver about what might a Tesla do in this particular situation. So it's really, really sophisticated way of approaching machine learning and kind of leapfrogging the training. And they've done that at the expense of the driver's privacy because they've collected an enormous amount of information, exactly where you are, exactly how you're driving. And one of the things that concerns me is that you don't really even own a Tesla, actually. So one of the things that there was a bit of news recently about a crash, Tesla crash, and the driver knew that all the data about this crash, everything you could possibly want to know about the crash, was stored in the Tesla. But Tesla wouldn't give them the data and required like a court order. And so really, do you own that car if it's holding all this data kind of against you? So I don't think they've got the right approach there. I think that's not right. When we buy something like a Tesla, then we should own it. Actually, what I really want is self-driving minibuses that are communally owned. So I don't actually care. I hope that cars just become a thing of the past. So maybe it's a secret strategy to get everyone to start hating their own car.
Okay. Any more questions? There must be one more. I'm going to ask you to say one, like, in your field that you've just talked about, just give your favourite positive development that's happening right now or about to happen soon, a thing that you're most excited about.
Widespread end-to-end encryption through things like Signal and WhatsApp.
The current project to visit Mars, ExoMars, and the search for potential signs of past and maybe even current very, very basic life.
Whose project's that?
ExoMars. It's an ESA project, European Space Agency.
I'm going to go with the maker movement because we have a really difficult supply chain for lots of the high-power rocketry stuff in the UK. So what I'm slowly starting to see is people bypassing it all and starting to make their own stuff, and that's brilliant. So I'm going to go the maker movement.
A fantastic end to say the maker movement is the most positive development even in rockets. So great. Thank you for the speakers. Can we thank them again, everyone? Thank you. Just a quick advert that people like Adrian and Neil run this every 3 months upstairs in Leith on Bold Street with Ignite talks on all sorts of subjects. It's a great event. Sign up to it if you haven't already. A great day of talks about making and discussion about making. Thank you, everyone. And a brief reminder that tomorrow there's an event at Liverpool.
Yes, so 10:30, unlike 10 o'clock, well, I'm going to be there from 10 now because I've been telling people stupidly half an hour earlier than I'd said earlier. So 10:30 till 3 o'clock tomorrow at Does Liverpool is Make a Brunch. It's very informal.
Ladies and gentlemen, the library will be closing in 20 minutes. I repeat, the library will be closing in 20 minutes. Thanks.
See, you've only got 20 more minutes to chat to the makers and things, so coming to Does Liverpool tomorrow, you can chat to them some more. Joe will be there if you want to know, get him to sign your rocket or something. That's how much You could 3D print a rocket on our 3D printers. Let's have a coffee and a bacon butty. 10:30 till 3 tomorrow at Does Liverpool. Thank you.
Thank you.